Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer, and with me today is Sam MacLean. And you go by Sam, right?
I do.
Sam. Okay. So
It's not
Sam.
it's not my formal name, but I
Okay.
go by Sam.
Sam MacLean of Red Dog Ranch in Wisconsin. And basically, you do equine massage, various types of equine massage, acupressure,
Body work.
and
Yeah.
just body work in general, as well as energy work on horses. Correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So, Sam is with us today to talk about heart math. And I think several episodes back, I sort of mentioned it. I've been looking it up on the internet and trying to find out what I could about it. And then lo and behold, I discover Sam, a good friend of mine, is a heart math, I guess, practitioner, would you say?
So I got certified as a mentor and coach.
In heart math.
That's
Okay.
in heart math. Yeah. They have various different levels of certifications. So
Okay.
that's my little level.
And I'm sure there's a million other things we could talk about, but let's start with the heart math topic today. And I am excited because I'm going to learn as much as everybody else during this interview. And so I think like my initial understanding from just a little bit I've looked up online, and what really caught my interest was the research done on how the information, electric information, or through our nervous system in our body, that there's more information that comes from our heart to our minds than there is from our brain sort of to our hearts. And I think the old paradigm that all of us are still a bit stuck in is that the brain directs everything.
Right.
And even the work that Candace Pert did was fascinating, the molecules of emotion, because
Of
she's saying,
emotion.
nope, your heart produces, all kinds of peptides that work throughout your body. Same with the gut or the liver or the
Yep.
kidneys. So it's a pretty old model, but it's still popular to think that the brain controls the body. And so I
Right.
love the research on heart math that's going, no, actually, our heart sends a lot of information to our brain and has a lot of
Yeah.
influence over thoughts or just the functions of our brain. So could you start
Right.
off with a little bit of what heart math is? What's sort of if somebody says, what is it? What's the
Right.
simplest answer?
Yes. So heart math, the mission of heart math and kind of their purpose is to awaken the heart of humanity. And they do this through basically two vehicles. One vehicle is the Heart Math Institute, and that's the vehicle where all of the research takes place. And I started to look at, okay, well, how can I describe the research? And it's almost impossible because they have over 300 published research papers. They started their work focusing on individuals and how their research could help people become more resilient to everyday stress. And then they realized, well, hey, one person makes a difference, but if we focus some research on maybe more of a social structure, then we can make even more of a difference. And now, because they've been doing this since 1991, now they're actually focusing a lot of their research on global coherence. So not just individuals, not just a small group of social people, but globally, what impact can their research and their techniques and their technology have on global systems? So the research part of it is one piece, and then they have heart math Inc., which does all of the education and the training and the certification. And then they also have 3 different types of little technology. If we have time, we'll go over the most simplest one today and what that allows you to do and how it allows you to learn more about your heart and how it connects to your brain and helps generate a state of coherence. So
Okay.
that's kind of heart math in a nutshell.
So out of the research that you've looked at from HeartMath, what are some of the top,
Mm-hmm.
what are, like for me, one of the things that caught my attention was just that the heart sends more neural information to the brain than vice versa. What are some of the research things that
Right.
caught your attention or that really
Yeah.
made a shift for you?
So that one for sure, because I think as a culture, we are still kind of stuck in this brain as the emperor, right? Who controls all things and manifests all things. But they call it ascending neural pathways. There are more ascending neural pathways going from the heart to the brain than there are the other way around. So our bodies are just designed, right, on a very practical level to send more signals up there.
Interesting.
And that, yeah, that for me was just like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, because
Um,
the inherent design of the body really speaks to the function and the importance. So
right,
it's that old form function principle. And so it's interesting to
totally,
know that that is the form, which lets us know how important the heart is at sending information to the brain if there's more neural
right,
pathways already there.
right. I can't remember who said this, and I'm probably going to get the metaphor incorrect, but somewhere along the line, someone mentioned that if we think of our brain as a basic computer, that will help us understand truly what your brain is for. And it receives input, right? So our brain receives input from all of our senses, from all different parts of our body, including our heart. And then it goes through calculations based on patterns that we've taught it over, I'm 59 this year, so over
Mhm.
my 59 years, it goes through all of these mechanisms and it then spits out a result based on all the input it's received and all the programming that I've, you know, had going on through my whole life, and it spits out a result.
Mm.
And so if you look at it that way, it's a much more simplistic view of the brain rather than thinking your brain is going to come up with these quadratic equations and whatever else.
Yes.
Um, because like if you think about Albert Einstein, I mean, there are these stories about Albert Einstein receiving all of these amazing visions and images and equations kind of like downloaded into him, and that's not really something the brain would do. So he was probably in a different state, a more receptive brain state, and probably had some heart coherence along with it that allowed him to be open and receptive to the
Just
infinite number of
information.
data points.
Absolutely.
Yep,
Yeah. And so I was
yep.
going to ask you too, can you like, what does coherence mean, or what do you mean by coherence? I mean, I know the definition, but what does that mean in terms of heart math or the body?
Okay. Um, before I get there, because I there's a lot to kind of build up to coherence, so let me take a little step back.
Okay.
Um, I want to go to like the cellular level for a second. Um, and this kind of relates to some of the research that I really resonated with heart math. So on a cellular level, the cells produce very small amounts of an electrical current. Every time something goes in or out of the cell membrane, there's a little electrical current. And so all of those electrical currents that are happening all over our body then also produce a magnetic field. And
Mm.
so then if you think of this, our body is just full of all these really subtle energies producing this magnetic field. So we refer to it as the bioelectric biomagnetic field. And so for us, that's about 3 feet around the body in all directions. And the heart itself is the largest producer of your bioelectric biomagnetic field in the body. And
Mm.
it can be measured, so there's all these different things that if you have to go to the hospital for something, they're going to measure, right, your heartbeat,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to be able to see it come up,
An EKG.
on the
Yep.
monitor,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's a measure of the electrical field that your heart is generating. So when we
And
talk
you're
about
also saying, sorry, just to say, you're also saying that that
Yep.
electromagnetic field, that 3 foot sort of space around us or an arm's length, that what we consider sort of our personal space or where we can sense something without really seeing it or hearing or even touching, that we have a receptivity in that sort of field of personal space that's authentic, that is measurable, tangible, according to this
Right.
research.
Right. Yep. Yep, for sure.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
and they've even, they being heart math, they've even done some research as to getting into a coherent state. And I know I'm still kind of building to what
Mm-hmm.
is coherence, but getting to a coherent state actually enables you to be more intuitive. So you're picking up on data and information in that field, and you're more open to it when you're in a coherent state compared to when you're in a more chaotic state.
Yeah, and I
Um,
really love this because, sometimes that sixth sense or intuition or that knowing that we have, we doubt ourselves a lot because it's taken years to even develop technology that could measure some of these subtle forces, but that doesn't mean they're not real.
mhm.
And it's kind of exciting to hear
No,
some of the
totally.
research on it because it goes from the land of woo woo into no, you are actually sensing something that you can rely on.
Mhm. Right, right. Yeah. And so all of this information, if you go on HeartMath, um, if you go on the website, they have a whole section on research. And so if you're interested in that kind of information, there's a lot of information there. Um, I will also share, they have a free ebook that talks about the science, the specific science that underlies heart math as a
Mhm.
system. Um, that's free. You can download it and read it. And it's also really helpful.
Great. I will make sure to
So
put that in the notes for this podcast too.
yeah,
I'll,
and I've got it written down, so I'll say the exact name.
okay.
Um, so when when we are in let's say a really happy state, a content state, a positive state, our autonomic nervous system, um, it reflects that, and there is order through our whole system. The autonomic nervous system has ties to every part of our body, our digestion, our cardiovascular system, our immune system. And as humans, we have the capacity to self-regulate. We can regulate our autonomic nervous system. It's not like a horse, and we'll be talking about horses. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like a horse or a dog or other mammals or animals where their autonomic nervous system, they might be alert, right? And in a sympathetic mode, because sympathetic doesn't always mean bad. It
Right.
just means a heightened state of arousal. They're alert, right? And then they could go to a parasympathetic where there's a more rest, the saying of rest and digest. But they don't have the same capacity that we do to self-regulate that. And we can self-regulate our autonomic nervous system by experiencing feelings that feelings of renewal, like appreciation, like love, like gratitude and compassion.
Mm.
And this ties to coherence because when you're in a state of coherence, it is a state where your whole body is in a state of order and synchronicity, versus when you're out of coherence, you are typically in a state of anxiety, of frustration, and it's a chaotic state.
And
And
how linked is that to, say, dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system versus the sympathetic nervous system? Is there a correlation where you would say either the coherence leads to dominance of the parasympathetic, or would you say dominance of the parasympathetic is part of coherence?
so it's really interesting because uh, HeartMath has established that the way to measure this coherence is through heart rate variability. And heart
Mm,
rate variability, oh, I thought I brought a diagram. Well, let's use this.
that's okay because it's a
I don't know
podcast,
if you
so
can see this.
it's a heart rhythm,
So this
like
is
an
the heart rhythm.
EKG.
So let's say it's an EKG. You can see
Mm-hmm.
all the jagged little lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
This particular example is of an actual woman who was feeling stress and frustration. So imagine that every beat of that heart rate, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
a space of time in between each of those beats. Heart rate variability is a measure of the space between all of those beats.
Oh.
And it's like the Goldilocks effect. If you have the same spacing at all times, there's no variability, that is an indicator of not having good health and being in a state of distress or dis-ease.
Interesting.
Your heart is meant to have variability. Now, if you have too much variability, right, it's the Goldilocks.
Mm-hmm.
It's too hot,
Right.
it's too cold. It's
Right.
that nice in between, right? So having high heart rate variability is a research founded indicator of high states of health, well-being, and a sense and a state of resilience.
And so does that essentially mean that based on, say, the immediate situation, that we're sort of flexible in that space, that it can become, it's not
Totally.
wildly, it's not wildly larger or smaller, but there's variabilities
Yep.
larger or smaller, and it's never just the same static.
Right. Exactly. And what it also means, going back to your question about sympathetic, parasympathetic, is that it shows regulation. There's a nice sine wave in this heart rate variability here. That sine wave demonstrates that there is a give and take between the autonomic nervous system of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Neither one is good or bad,
Right.
but when you're in a state of coherence, there's this beautiful sine wave where they work together.
Interesting. Very interesting, because I've always thought of, I mean, it's like a hot and cold water tap, the nervous system. But I
Mhm.
guess, and I have always understood that when there is a balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, that it's what we call sort of being in the zone. Like if you're
Mhm.
doing sports, and that's what you're describing as coherence, I
Right.
think, is that sort of fluctuation.
100%.
Yeah, that equality. Yeah,
Yep.
and it's interesting because you
Yep.
can be under really strenuous exercise, and that's what the zone describes in sports, is that
Mhm.
there's a little bit of automatic function where you're not in you're not having to get from the brain to the hand back to the brain to do something. It's starting to feel like a habit, or your
Mhm.
body takes over somehow. And so that's a great description
Right.
of that. Helps me understand coherence, what you mean by
Yeah.
coherence, a lot. Yes.
Yep. And so the state of coherence, reflected in this heart rate variability, um, demonstrates high performance, high levels of immune system function, digestion, and it's not just your brain, right? It's
It's the
not
whole
just the
body.
brain that has the
Mhm.
benefits. It's the whole body that has these benefits.
Yes.
And what's really fascinating to me is, because I've studied over the years, because I'm as old as I am, so many different spiritual traditions and meditations and, you know, breathing techniques and all this stuff. But what I have loved about heart math is that it combines the breathing with the feeling.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, and that is the key, because um, the feeling of love and gratitude, or even just a more neutral emotion like appreciation. A lot of times people have a hard time feeling love because it's tied to they love their kids or they love their husband. It's hard to, love somebody way over there. So
Mm.
even just the feeling of appreciation for someone or something, genuinely feeling that in conjunction with breath, that is like the magic potion for the heart math techniques.
And that's so interesting. A lot of the work I do, one of the first things I'll check out with a horse and rider is, are both in, and I did a podcast on this a couple times sessions ago, but are both in what I call the learning frame of mind, which is sort of describing what you're talking
Mhm.
about, because I go, at the very minimum, if we're not calm, if we're in a heightened state of energy, then we're
Mhm.
influencing our horse with that energy. Like a horse's level of sensitivity to touch is
Mhm.
almost beyond what we can comprehend. And
Right.
I'm sure if we think of touch also as this electromagnetic field around our body, they can't get away from what we're feeling. And whether it's
Right.
excitement or fear, I go, sometimes too much energy is just too much energy for the horses.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. In fact, um, I don't know what it is the last couple of weeks, but I have been working with clients and their horses, a lot of whom are extremely sensitive horses whose biofields, these bioelectric magnetic fields, are beyond 15 feet from the body in all
Mm.
directions. I mean, we're talking probably 30 feet.
Yes, that's what we call a
Um,
sensitive horse.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And the guardians are frustrated because they come to the barn, they have expectations, right? They've got a training ride that they have to do. They only have a certain amount of time. They come after work, and their horse is just like, whoa.
And bouncing off the
Uh-uh.
walls. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And HeartMath has done some amazing research on the HeartMath techniques, and sharing this heart-to-heart connection between people and horses. And the most fascinating thing to me, and not that I didn't know this because I did, but actually reading about it and seeing about it and then putting it into practice has been just amazing. So the horses modulate our hearts way more than we modulate their hearts. They are so powerful, so incredibly powerful. But we have these really crazy, powerful brains that tend to really get in the way and cause a lot of chaos. And so by teaching people how to access these more coherent states, and they don't have to be perfect, they just have to start practicing some of these techniques. Being with the horse, there will be more resonance between the two automatically, as long as that human is open to it. And in fact, one of the things that HeartMath discovered is that when people are in the sphere of horses, their heart rate changes its frequency to a very low frequency, which is typically not something that our hearts normally do on our own.
That is
So
fascinating. And I
right?
think that's sometimes why we don't know why we want to be around horses, but it feels
No,
great.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even people who have never been around horses, they're around horses and they're like,
There's
wow, this is
something wonderful here.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally.
It's very different. And I looked it up one time. I was writing stuff and I looked it up and it was like the horse's heart, I think. Oh, I can't remember right offhand. And I wish I had had this ready for this podcast, but the horse's heart weighs typically like between 10 and 15 pounds, and ours weighs about 1 or 2 pounds. And the brains were
Yeah.
reversed. Our brain weighed like 4 times the amount that their brain weighs. And
Mm-hmm.
it just, I thought, because I thought it was interesting just to look at the physical structure, right?
Right.
Horses have these enormous hearts and they have enormous bodies, so it makes sense, but they have these tiny
Uh-huh.
little brains. And we have
Right.
these enormous brains for our relatively small bodies, but we have small
Eyes. Yeah.
hearts. And I
Yeah.
always wondered if there was something, if that was sort of the relationship where we can actually improve horses' lives by using our
Mm-hmm.
higher brain functions, but they
Mm-hmm.
improve our lives so much. And it has always been this intangible thing that
Yeah.
I think when you feel it, that's why we get called crazy horse people. Because we put up like we put up with so much chaos and we organize our lives around our horses, but there's
Right.
something
And
there
spend
for us.
untold amounts of money making sure
Yes.
that they're healthy and yeah.
Yeah, so it's really good to know that that is, and that that's one of the only times it happens for humans, is that the
Mm-hmm.
hearts, the horses' hearts are so powerful that it actually changes ours or
Mm-hmm.
affects
Yeah.
ours if we're open to it.
Yeah. Right. And the cool thing about this is you don't have to be touching your horse, right? Because we're talking these big fields of energy. You don't have to touch the horse to share in this resonance between the two of you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's just, and I always call it the personal space bubble, as if we were all
Hmm.
bodies with this sort of invisible bubble. And there's some horses where 50 feet, 100 feet away,
Mhm.
they're already responding to the
Yep.
human. And we can see it through the body language, but we can almost feel it
Yeah.
like a wall that the horse puts up and says, if you come any closer, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
you know. And when horses are in stalls or
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
paddocks and we
Yeah.
walk in with our busy minds and our bad day and our agenda and our time frames,
Yeah.
some horses
Yeah.
can just like explode from that overwhelming energy when we come in with that. And not all horses, a lot of
100%.
horses.
And no, but they also might shut down. Other horses will shut down as their way of managing that, right? So they go into a different state. And imagine if you're in a big barn, think of how many people are coming in and out of that barn all day long, and all the different horses and all the different energy. And yeah, for some horses, it can be really, really challenging.
Really stressful. Yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, we often think of our horses as our therapy to go and get away from the
Right.
world. But it sometimes, if we're not paying attention to our partner, the horse, if we're not
Hmm.
looking at it as a relationship, then we can impose a lot of baggage and a lot of stress on a horse,
Definitely.
which isn't a fun partnership for them. They don't get a lot of
No,
benefit out of that.
no, which then doesn't make it a partnership, right?
Right.
If there's only one person getting benefit, then that's not a partnership.
Right.
And this is the other piece of heart math that I really love, because um, I do a lot of volunteer body work with therapy centers, and the horses are oftentimes um, uh, really depleted by this constant use for human benefit, emotional, mental benefit of the humans. Um, and so when I first started thinking about going through the Heart Math program, I thought, well, this would be a way for me to help all the guardians who learn about Heart Math be able to share more with their horses and to be a better partner for their horses, because they're not relying on the horse to give them those good feelings. They themselves have a higher state of resilience just coming into the barn, and then they can share fully from themselves with their horse. And that sense and that state of resilience, especially nowadays. I mean, if you think
Oh,
about all
yeah.
the stress that people are under, and you're
It's a
turning on the
particular.
TV and
No, and that's
mhm,
really why I wanted to have this interview with you too, as I go, there's so much going on in the world where we have
mhm,
to find our strength on the inside,
yep,
and yes, I think our horses are just a huge part of keeping us grounded and happy as individuals. It's huge right
mhm,
now, but
mhm,
we don't want to deplete our partners either. We want to find a way that it's
right,
mutually beneficial with our horses.
right,
And
yeah, for
especially when
sure,
horses are
definitely,
lesson horses or therapy horses, or they have
mhm,
a job where they're having to deal with a lot of different people, that can be particularly
right,
challenging for horses.
yep,
So
yep,
I was surprised that Heart Math even had exercises until I spoke with you.
mhm,
I went, oh, there's
yeah,
exercises. So
yeah,
could you share one in this
yeah,
podcast that would be easy
yeah.
to try?
I would I would love to. Can I just talk a little bit more about resilience? Because I
Oh,
think it'll make
absolutely.
sense before we jump into the exercise. So when you think of resilience, what just a quick little definition, what does that mean to you?
It's such a great question because when I talk about balance, which is the word I use that is similar to coherence, I go, balance is
Hmm.
always an equalization between opposing forces. So the
Hmm.
opposing forces, one is not good or bad. But as you equalize opposing forces, what you get is a net sum 0 force. So it feels great, right? And so it's
Right.
not that, like, you could think of it as standing in the middle of a teeter-totter. The left side and right side is not good or bad, but too much of
Right.
one or too much of the other can become challenging. So
Right.
I always tell people, I go, balance is an activity. It's not a place where you
Oh, I
land.
like that.
You know,
Yeah.
balance is an activity. And
Right.
that to me is what resilience is that, oh, okay, there's a force from the left. I can make an adjustment. There's a force from the right. I can make an adjustment. Somebody's coming at me with a whole lot of angry energy. I can make an adjustment within myself. And so that to me is that if we think of it as an activity, and that was even the last podcast with Deb, she was talking about posture, not as a static, frame, but
Right.
as an activity. And I think that's how I would describe resilience too, is that you're trying to find this homeostasis. You're trying to find this equalization of all these different sort of factors. And that is, I want to say, is unique to each situation. And that's what makes us resilient, is that we're looking
Right.
for
Yeah. No, I
this,
love that.
this balance no matter what we're doing. And if we go a little too
Right.
far one way or the other, no big deal. Sometimes we need that.
Yeah. That's,
I
yeah.
also find it's
Yeah. That's
interesting in
beautiful.
training, like if you take one of these highly sensitive horses that you're talking about with a big personal space bubble, I find when I'm working with those horses that what you're talking about is critical for those type of horses. But when sometimes that mechanism of flight is thwarted for a horse and they can't get away, if there's a high level of defensiveness or fear, instinctually, people and horses will revert to a new strategy or try an opposing strategy to defend themselves. So it's not unusual for a flighty horse to suddenly go on the attack. People find that surprising. I go, no, that's normal. And so with horses that are aggressive, with horses that are trying to tell you, stay out of my space or I'm going to come at you, that's another type of horse that people really don't know what to do with. And the same thing of slowing down and finding your own coherence, sort of, it just reduces the defensiveness in the horse. And
Totally.
again, sort of finding what you're calling coherence or what I've been calling balance, it just makes us more adaptable. We're more flexible to all of the things in life that we
Yes.
can't control. And that's what
100%.
you're talking
And
about with resilience.
yes. And so
Yeah.
HeartMath, I'm just going to read HeartMath's definition, because if you look up the definition of resilience in the dictionary, it's going to be a little different. Their definition is resilience is the capacity to prepare for, recover from, and adapt in the face of stress, challenge, or adversity. And so we like to talk about resilience helping you build your inner battery,
Mm,
because if your battery isn't fully charged, right,
right.
you can't be in balance.
And
You're
can't
going to be
cope.
thrown off balance really fast.
Yes.
No,
Yes.
not at all. So the techniques, the practices, they're all very, very simple. We're going to do the very first one. And there are a few others that are designed to be on the go. And they've designed them this way because we want to be able to recover and build up those reserves all throughout the day. Because we don't want to go into work, let's say on Monday, and then by Friday we have nothing left, right? Our inner
Right.
battery is shot And then we're sitting on the couch watching Netflix, drinking wine, and eating a carton of ice cream, right? So
yes, absolutely.
we have to have super simple things that you can do all throughout the day. Driving in your car.
Mhm.
I've done this driving in my car. I've done this
Safely.
working
Yes.
with horses safely. Yeah,
Mhm.
totally safe. So the techniques all build those inner batteries, because what HeartMath found is that when you focus on something that's negative, we call it negative.
Mhm.
Let's say it's frustration with your boss, or
Something didn't go right.
depression, or anything, right? Anything
Mhm.
like that. When you focus on those types of emotions, those emotions deplete your energy. And so we refer to them as depleting emotions versus negative
Mm.
emotions. Um, However, the other side of the coin, like the emotion of appreciation or gratitude or compassion, those emotions renew and build up your energy reserves. And that's why it's so important for in heart math to focus on the feelings, and not just the heart and the breath. And
Yes.
that's how the inner reserves are built. Um, so we are going to start with the first technique, and it's called heart focused breathing.
Okay.
This is designed as something you can do wherever. You can do it in the grocery store. You know, you can do it with your eyes open. I'm going to encourage people, though, the first time to do it with their eyes closed. The first couple of times, I think it does help to avoid all this visual stimulation until you get really good at it. And then you can start practicing it. And a really good place to do this one is when you are grooming your horse, because when you're
Mm.
grooming your horse, doing this technique is really great, because it will slow you down. I When I come into barns, I see people grooming their horses like this,
Bam, 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 bam. Yeah. Hurry up, hurry up.
right? And it's just they're trying to go as fast as they can, and they're
Yes.
late, and
Yeah.
so imagine someone doing that to you, brushing your hair.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
by slowing it down, slowing down your breathing. So let's try it. So if you could sit in a comfortable position and relax your shoulders, close your eyes if you're in a safe place to do so, and you feel okay closing your eyes. And the other place I want you to focus your attention is on your armpits, and really soften your armpits, and then relax your toes. So feel your toes just kind of stretching out if they're in your shoes, maybe even wiggle them a little bit. And in that nice, comfortable position, then I want you to start focusing your attention in the area of your heart. Imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of that heart space. Breathing a little slower and a little deeper than usual. And just find an easy rhythm that's comfortable for you. And you're just going to maintain this focus, breathing in through the heart and breathing out from the heart. Slowing your breath, going a little deeper with your breath. but making sure that it's an easy rhythm where you feel comfortable. And if you get distracted, if your mind starts going off and wandering, it's not a big deal. Just return your attention to your breath. Breathing in through the heart and breathing out through the heart. Sometimes people will have a little difficulty doing this the first time. And so one of the things that I encourage is for people to put their hands over their chest. Even just doing this position with your hands touching your chest will actually increase the oxytocin that's flowing through your body, that little, that bonding hormone, that love hormone. And so even just doing this, if you are having a hard time focusing on breathing in and out of your chest, with your hands here, it might just do the trick. So you're just focusing again on the breath at this point. Breathing in through the chest and breathing out from the chest. Slowing the breath down and breathing a little deeper. And just continue with that for a minute. So just doing this very simple exercise will help neutralize those depleting emotions, will help reduce the impact of a stressful situation, and will also help plug those energy drains. So if you get off a really difficult phone call or you are anticipating something really bad, just going through this super simple little exercise is a great way to neutralize all of that. And
I noticed
and
as
for
we did it, the longer I focused on it, the more I was aware of feeling it.
okay, good.
And I played with my eyes open as well as closed because a lot of times I think the times I would need that exercise the most is when I get
Mm-hmm.
stuck in line or when I'm in traffic.
No, 100%, totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. And with your eyes open, um, it's no different, I don't think, than thinking through your favorite song, right? So if you're singing
right,
along with a song, you're processing information and you're driving at the same time. Well, all
right,
you're doing here is you're just processing information in terms of breathing in and out of your heart space. You don't have to close your eyes. You're just
right.
focused on that heart space.
No, and it was
But
so funny that you started with the armpits, and I was like, wow, my armpits are really tight. I had no idea.
oh, oh my gosh, it's my favorite thing. I had no idea how much tension we hold. When we think about relax your shoulders, we're thinking about up here.
Right.
Well, holy cow, loosen up those
Loosen up those pits.
pits.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
God. And that makes sense because I felt sort of a springy release around my upper chest. And that I thought, oh, that must be why she
Mm-hmm.
started there. But yes, I was holding
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
tension than I was aware of. When you said that, I was like, who'd have thunk? Hmm.
Yeah.
As probably
Yeah.
typical that we kind of, I
So
know, especially as riders, we tend to get really tight in the upper arm and the shoulder.
yeah. It's literally, it's everybody. It's not just horse people.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm not sure what it is, but yeah, it's very common.
Yeah.
So
And then,
that's the first heart math technique. And then the others we just build on. There's just layers that we continue to build on. But this is the foundational one, breathing through that heart space, that heart-centered breathing.
yes. No, and one of the most interesting things in our human brains is something called the reticular activation system, right? Which is just a neural network in our brain that goes from the brain stem that sort of spiders out into our entire brain. And it's kind of like it's a bit like Google or a search engine.
Mm-hmm.
So one part of
Mm-hmm.
us can make a choice of what to put in the search bar. But our reticular activation system is a filter that sort of is like a gatekeeper between the millions of bits of information that's available to our five senses. It sort of filters it out and brings to our conscious awareness the hundreds of bits that we could process in our consciousness at one
Mm-hmm.
time. And the filter is just how we direct it, right? So our sort of higher conscious self can say, notice the color yellow. And all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, everything yellow in the room jumps out at us, right?
Right.
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 And so that's how the reticular activation system works. And I found myself thinking about that because at first I couldn't experience or feel what you were
Mm-hmm.
talking about. I go, well, you could think in your mind, it's ridiculous. My lungs breathe, not my heart. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
the
Yeah.
more we focused on it, and that's how our nervous system works, is where we put our mental focus, energy flows.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what heart math is showing in their research that yes, indeed, it does flow. And what you're saying is that's exactly how you recharge your own battery.
Yep.
That is
Yep.
so cool. So I can put myself on the charger while I'm charging my phone. But yeah,
Right.
this year with flights and stuff, being at the airport has been stressful. And I go, that's
Oh my
the
gosh.
first thing that
Yeah.
came to mind was like dealing with delays or flight cancellations and long lines and trying to reschedule and get where
Mm-hmm.
you're going. That kind of stressful situation, you're standing around a lot, waiting in line, doing nothing.
Yes.
I go,
Right.
maybe checking your
Yep.
phone, maybe watching TikTok, but you're basically doing nothing. And that would be a perfect opportunity. Plus,
Yeah.
not deplete myself excessively because of the situation.
No, totally.
Yeah,
100%. Right. Because then if you're depleted, then you're not going to be good to anybody, yourself
right.
included.
Or
Mm-mm.
even if, a lot of my clients have to drive to the barn to go see their horse. And I go,
Mm-hmm.
that drive would be a perfect time to start.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And then walking in the barn with a different presence and or a different energy and see, does my horse notice? How
Mm-hmm.
does my horse
Mm-hmm.
respond?
Yep.
And even
Yep.
getting on the horse or beginning the ride, because I think as humans, we tend to get out in the future a lot.
Yes. All the time.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so I think
Anticipation.
that exercise really brought me into the present moment
Mm-hmm.
and really made me
Yep.
think about, because I think sometimes too with horses, it's like they cost a fortune. You rearrange your life, you work all the time. They never do what you want. They give us 5 minutes of happiness once a month, and we're all addicted, right? And I think that we get in a place sometimes where we forget that that feeling in our heart was why we picked the horse we have in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
or that feeling in our heart is why we were even drawn to horses in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good reminder every time we see our horse that, oh, yeah, this was something
Mm-hmm.
I dearly wanted, instead of
Mm-hmm.
getting caught up in the frustration that just goes hand in hand with owning a horse.
Right. Right. And if you're the type of guardian who really wants a partnership, right? You have a partnership with this sentient being who has his or her own emotions, good days, bad days, things affect them. And then you have the same thing. And now all of a sudden you're trying to be together. And then at some point you're trying to get on that sentient being's back.
Yeah.
And ride together.
Right.
So I think there's so much to be said for coming and focusing on the heart, that slows us down, helps us be more present, and helps us truly see the horse through a much more compassionate lens
Yes.
than sometimes we have a tendency to do.
And it feels better. I mean, why not do
Mm-hmm.
it? It feels better. And it
Mm-hmm.
maybe takes
Mm-hmm.
a few extra minutes, but there's a lot of benefit and it's not a big challenging thing to do.
Yeah. And I mean, it's worth testing it out, right?
Absolutely. And
It
I
doesn't
like
cost you anything, right? You're
exactly.
watching a free podcast. Test it out.
Test it out for sure. And I like that you use the word guardian when you refer to the owner or the rider. I like that.
I never use the word owner.
Yeah.
I don't think, and again, this is just me. I, as I can't, how can I own a sentient being? I paid money for this horse, but I don't own him or her.
Right. No, in fact, I had a client the other day and met her husband for the first time, who he's a little skeptical about her horse and her having a horse. And he was asking me
Mm-hmm.
questions and he said something about owning a horse. And I go, no, you don't really own a horse. I go, you can kind of think you own a dog, but you have a horse. I said, they make it very clear to us that there's no ownership just because you have a piece of paper.
Right.
I go, and if you think you own the horse, I love there's an
Oh
old
yeah, you're.
saying that a horse will buck off a king as quick as a groom. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's just horses. And I love
Yeah.
that about horses because they really, if we allow them, they help us become better people. And they
Mm-hmm.
have a way of getting to know our weaknesses as individuals. And they scratch at them a little,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm very sympathetic with all other horse owners. I go, my personal horses do that to me too. None of
Oh
us are free
yeah.
of it. It's not like my horses
Right.
are super trained just because I'm more educated or I do it for a living. I go, we all have weaknesses, and the
Mm-hmm.
horses have a way of sort of just like poking at them. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's, I think, as a way of helping us, not as
Yeah,
a way
that's
of
how we all
frustrating.
grow.
Absolutely.
Right. That's, yeah.
Yeah. And if
Yeah.
we can use and I will get the um website information for you as
Oh
well as
yeah.
for Heart Math, and I will get the download information and I will put that in the description box that will be below this video on YouTube.
Okay.
Okay,
And I'll
so
also include, there's a really great webinar that's all about the heart math research with horses. So if you're really interested in that, then people can go view that as well.
I think the biggest thing that really sticks out to me is, well, first of all, understanding coherence and understanding what that bioelectrical magnetic field is, and that is a measurable, tangible thing, even if we can't see it
Mm-hmm.
and touch it,
Mm-hmm.
that is something we can sense. And then the research on the horse's heart, like being within 10 or 15 feet of a horse,
Mm-hmm.
has such a positive effect on our heart. That to me is just
Mm-hmm.
huge.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
huge.
Well, and that's why there's so many therapy centers.
It's yes, and the equine assisted therapy. I did a podcast on that too, not too long ago with Deb Romero, and there are therapists who take as
Mm-hmm.
much care of their
Mm-hmm.
horses as they do their clients. And
Yeah.
there are therapists that just use the horse like a tool. And that breaks
Yeah.
my heart. I go,
Yeah.
because the horses give so much and we need to give
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Sam. I think we've
You're
covered quite
welcome.
a bit. And I don't even know
Good.
how to recap
Glad you
other
liked
than
it.
those few things. I learned a lot. So thank you
Oh,
for
good.
doing that.
Good.
And I will have
Yeah,
to
you're
have you
welcome.
back because
Okay.
I'd like to know more about sort of your work in the field and how this plays out, without
Hmm.
specific names or anything, but just examples or how
Yeah.
people utilize this
Yep.
information. So we'll have to do a repeat
Great.
at some point
Happy
or an
to.
encore.
Okay. Sounds
Excellent.
good.
All right. So thanks everybody for joining
Okay.
us.
Thank you.
Please like and share and subscribe and comment. And if you loved Sam, give her a big thumbs up. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.